Welcome and thank you for joining us. Um, the, the topic of our panel discussion here today is 2030, the age of automation, analytics, and abundance. Yeah. So I think all the speakers that we've heard till now, as part of today, have kind of brought us to this point where we talk about this age of automation and analytics. And many of you are leaders, and most of you are leaders in your organization, kind of leading this wave of data analytics and automation, right? So I think we're extremely privileged to have all of you on this panel. So the topic is how will this abundance of this automation and analytics lead to a lot of abundance. Hopefully we will address that at some point in this panel, right? So if we were to take a step back and answer this first question of what does the technology stack for India in 2030 look like, are there any responses, any immediate thoughts that come to mind?
So I think, in my view, all the relevant technologies which are up here, to a large extent, they are just booming up or they are forming up. They would be mainstream, okay, right from robotics to artificial intelligence to machine learning to blockchain. I think most of these today are still in an isolation. And when these come together and the use cases comes together for these, would be where we see these technologies being really used without really feeling that we are using a technology at this point of time, right? So, simple example, we use iPhone, but it's a big technology, but we don't feel it that we are using a technology. So today we know that we are using an artificial intelligence. Today we feel that we are using a blockchain, but these will be realities. I can give you one simple examples which are already becoming a use cases in some of the pharmaceutical industries or the healthcare industries is, let's take a example of a cancer at this point of time, right? So what happens in a normal cancer situation is that you have lots and lots of scans taken, and then there is a special oncologist who is really marking up an area where a treatment has to be done, and then he is doing a radioactive or chemotherapy for this, right? And this marking is done only once today. And then the cancer treatment is on for this whole area. But that's not the reality. The reality is actually this area is shrinking and this marking should be done again and again. But what's happening with the help of robotics, with the help of machine learning and with the help of AI is that now you can do these markings intelligently and you can do it in matter of hours and minutes. And think about it, a robot doing this for you, and think about it as a robot administrating this for you. Right? So where do we reach? So these are going to become mainstream. These are at a very nascent state at this point of time. So from my view, all these 4-5 technologies which we are talking about are going to be real time, and we will see this happening real time. The next one which I feel today, as somebody from Unilever said that he has 22 petabytes of data, right, in-house. I don't think anything would be in-house, okay? Everything is on-prem, will be gone. Everything is on cloud, everything is available for anybody and everybody to use it. As Himal said, that you would have to change your algorithms to source data and use this data across them. So it will be on-prem and all these technologies will be mainstream by now. An extreme example, which I believe is a little far off, but I also personally believe is that there would be a lot of people who would be out of job if we are not really ensuring that they are upskilled. In fact, if you see what we are already starting to see is that technology is taking away these jobs. But if we are not upskilling them, they would have this. We'll have to think about this. And we will have people who are without jobs and the governments are paying them just for as a minimum wage income. But I'll talk about it more as we come.
Sure.
I think I was just thinking, one, we need to talk offline about everything moving to the cloud and not everything being on-prem, but that's a different one. My own construct about India in 2030 is, there are two aspects to technology, right? One is the consumer aspect of technology, where an individual consumes technology, and second is the systemic impact of that technology. How do governments, how do corporates, how do enterprises use it? If you look at the first phase, which is consumption of technology at an individual level, at 2030, India wouldn't be very different from the rest of the world. It would be pretty much where the rest of the world is, whether it comes to consuming your technology. I mean, even today, if you look at it, the individual consumer does not stay behind. I mean, pretty much we are where the rest of the world is. The Western economies, the developed Asian economies, or anywhere else. The systemic adoption of technology by 2030 would require a little bit of investment, a little bit of forethought, and some amount of regulation that will come in. There we might see a little bit of phase lag compared to some of the other economies. That's my take on it. I think even if you look at today, but the good thing is we are moving in that direction. And probably while we might have lost a little bit of time, I think we are working hard to quickly catch up on where we are so that we're not left behind. I think Beam's a great example, which Nikhil was speaking about. I think that and a few other things that we've seen, innovations, RTI and things like that, clearly we're catching up there. That's my take.
Just to add, right? So, I'm, I mean, from a country perspective, we are growing really, really well. I mean, hopefully, if all of the stats go through by 2030, we'll be number 2 or number 3, which will be absolutely fantastic. The journey that we are on, both from a startup perspective and also doing things like Beam, are actually taking us to a slightly different level. And if those things go, I really feel, along with the strong technical workforce that we have, I mean, doing coding to us, it's basically like doing math, right? I mean, everybody says, in grade 7, do you know Java? If the answer is no, then hell, you actually go and read the book, right? So I think that is enabling a very, very strong technical workforce that we already have. I just hope that the next WhatsApp comes from somebody like India, because the impact that it has on somebody who understands countries like India, because those can easily go into the likes of China, will be huge. And once those impacts are huge, those become the next generation companies. So I just sincerely hope that with the movement that is happening right now, we develop the next WhatsApp or the Facebook.
Fully agree with all the topics you talked about. I think I come from a slightly different perspective. I think for us, from wearing the Unilever hat, the machine learning and deep learning, how that uplifts people's lives. I'll give one simple example. We run this awareness program, hygiene awareness program in rural India, where we send people with sort of samples and teach women and children how to be hygiene, right? Because hand wash is the most critical thing to prevent a disease, especially in the rural India. And it's one of the prevailing issues we're facing today. So then, how do you incentivize this guy or girl who is going to the remote villages and mobilize the people, women and children, and go through this education process? So we said, okay, build a simple app, take a picture, send it to us, and we will incentivize you depending on how many people you gathered and gave the session, right? So then comes the trust issue. Okay, what if this guy pulls out a lot of people and takes a picture and sends it to us? So we did a very simple machine learning image processing capability to understand how many women show up in that event. And then, very easily, that based on the calculation we do through the image processing, we're able to incentivize. First of all, we built the trust with the cheap technology, with the machine learning, and able to uplift a person's life. For me, I think that's a profound impact of technology. I think as this technology evolves in the space, I think we'll find many number of these use cases.
In my first question, we spoke about pretty much like the technology stack and what some of these technologies are doing, right? As leaders in your organization, how are you also thinking about security, authenticity, identity? Are those concerns? Because with this massive amount of automation and analytics that's happening, how are you kind of looking at some of those concerns which come up naturally?
My take on this is that, for a very long time, we've looked upon physical assets as something that we're very close to. We guard them very closely, right? Whether it be the certificates that we had, whether it's the money in the bank, our passwords. I mean, I know this for sure, right? Your everyday passwords and your bank passwords will be a lot more complex. We accord it a lot of importance. By 2030, your online profiles will be as important, if not any less, right? It's also, even if you see, even right now, all the regulations that's coming in on WhatsApp, you know that there is a certain legal aspect to what you say, which is going to be measured. This was not the case when social media started spreading. By 2030, it's going to be a lot more rampant. So even at a consumer level and again at an enterprise level where it exists even today, security is going to be paramount. Your whole concept of, a little bit of where we've been a little lax in actually, that's our own thinking, that's our own culture, that's got to change and that will change. If you look at GDPR is a good example, right? I mean, the amount of way people were misusing our data, there's going to be there are a lot more checks today than there used to be in the past, and that's bound to continue. My take.
I completely agree, but I have one bit to it. We have been talking about security even when we had mainframes, right? And we are talking about security even today. So that's a topic which will remain. Okay, it's only how we tackle it, and we would have been tackling it. So it's a point which I would say, let's say, how much do we feel we are secure? Do you feel keeping money in the bank locker is secure, or in your own locker is secure? A very simple example, right? So, and as Himal said, security is inbuilt, right? It would be a part of our stream into every products which we built or every products which we are consuming. So it would go through these checks and balancings, right? GDPR and things like this on the personal security front would go into all those things. Last but not the least, which I feel is the most critical part, is a human firewall, as we correctly said. So no matter what build systems which we build, it's the human firewalls and the value systems which come into the play, right? So till we are able to put a discipline around this value systems and the things, I think we are fine.
In my session, you might have noticed that I didn't call out security as one of the impediments, but I called out veracity, bias, and the residency or the regulatory compliances, etc. I think I fully agree. Security is just given, right? Threats are going to happen. It's going to be multiple, and we need to design by design, right? Multi-factor authentication is now pervasive on our banking accounts, banking transactions. So I think building on that, we just have to do it, no choice. I think for me, more profound impact is on the bias and the trust. I think it's very easy to build the trust, very difficult to build the trust, but easy to lose the trust in one day, right? What happened with Cambridge Analytica, etc. Cambridge Analytica is actually keeping me awake every night as we build this data lake, right? What happens when, inadvertently the data leaks happens, right? And then what is the impact of that? And people not start trusting the data. So I think, between the trust and the bias is, much more profound impact on going to be on our society going forward.
One of the things just to add is, how do we treat the security teams within the org? I think it has to be everybody's responsibility. And B is, you can't say, oh, by the way, and then at the end I will do an audit of the security team. And, the view of the security team is they are basically a blocker, right? They have to be hand in hand. And, it's also a lot of the mindset change that, hey, look, how do I use security to actually boost up the capabilities and not actually to diminish down any of the capabilities. So I think it's also partly changing our mindset on how do we approach security.
Next is a very sort of random question. If I were to ask you to predict in 2030, what are some of the technologies that are probably not going to be around? Any?
Should we start an Excel spreadsheet? The world of applications will die. It will be about services and the experiences on top of it. Most of the traffic through what we call it as internet will actually be gone, and there'll be a lot more voice. There will be a lot more AR-based stuff. The hidden stuff that just happens, through voice, through cognitive stuff, that probably will be more pervasive than your browser.
My take is that, and agreeing with Himal on applications moving away and becoming a service, is also on the whole world of data science itself will fundamentally change. Today, data science to an extent is the holy grail, right? Everybody is running behind it. You have a lot of investments, but it's going to become mainstream by 2030. One, education levels of people who are going to use it, that's going to come in. Secondly, technology is going to make it a lot easier for us to not really be nerds to be there. You don't really need to be a data scientist to use it, but a lot of those translation layers where you can actually pose a hypothesis and that will actually get solved, that's going to happen. We work with a lot of startups and we can see a lot of innovation coming up in that space where they're trying to commoditize some of these things, right? So that's probably, and again, this is more in my field of work in the world of data, I see that change coming up.
So I completely agree that apps would be something which we'll be all using. It's what we are all used to. What I personally also believe would be there is a little contradictory to you is that I think we all will become nerds in some way, right? And we are. If you look at our kids right now, they are much more technology savvy than what we are today, right? So in my view, we would be more nerds than what we are today. And so we will create this society. I think it's a need of an hour, because if we are using artificial intelligence, if we are using machine learning, and if we are using all these technologies, by default, we would learn these technologies in a simpler way. Of course, not in the way which we are learning today, but in a simpler way.
I think, if you go back in time, when Apple first introduced iPhone, when it took away the physical keyboard, everybody said, oh, what happened to my keyboard, right? I think BlackBerry was still relying on that keyboard, and we know what happened to BlackBerry. I hope in the next 12 years, the systems evolve into more naturally interacting with us. Actually, that's the point you were trying to say, the connect, right? I think that natural behavior of interaction between humans and machines needs to have, I hope it happens. I mean, even now, Siri has developed into what, last 6 years, but it can't understand my accent. When I speak in English, most of you can understand, but Siri cannot understand, right? And I put sometimes Siri and Alexa to fight to get what I can get out of them. So I hope the people in Microsoft, as Amazon and Apple are listening to this, right? Because I think that's where the fundamental shift needs to happen in about understanding the natural way of interacting with each other.
Hemal, on a lighter note, someone said probably the CIO role would not exist a couple of years back, right? So if there was a role that you think would probably, that does not exist today, but would potentially exist in the future, do you want to take a dig at that sort of a prediction?
Oh, we will have a lot of. Actually, I'll go back to the same words. Very nerdy czar developers. That will be the best roles to have.
We are pitching to bring back the chief technology officer roles again.
On that note, I think we will close the panel. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on what this next decade of analytics and automation is going to look like. Thank you so much.